What's up, you guys? Matt Jablonski here with The Point of Change. It is Sunday night, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, and you know what that means? It is time for The Point of Change Meets. Every week Sunday night at 9 p.m. Central, I bring on somebody from the recovery world, a recovery advocate, or just a recovering addict, someone from anywhere in the world that has an amazing story of addiction and recovery. And tonight is no different. Tonight we have Ryan Hampton from the Voices Project is coming to share with us. So we're going to talk about his addiction, his recovery, and the advocacy work that he does nowadays. So if you guys would, go ahead and hit that share button. Send me up some likes and loves. Love you guys so much. Thank you for joining me. And let's get this show on the road. What's up, you guys? Thank you guys for joining me. Let's see who's all here so far. We got Allison Holden, Catherine, Gavin, Ashley, Marie, Giza, and Katie Gaff. Thank you, ladies, for joining me. Guys, hit that share button. Let me know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. Love having you guys here. Thank you for joining me on this Memorial Day weekend. I hope you guys are having a beautiful weekend. I did. I went to the beach. I got to hang out with my girlfriend. It was just an awesome weekend. Really great weekend. And tonight, I'm going to top my weekend off by hanging out with Ryan Hampton from the Voices Project. We're going to hear a great story of addiction and recovery tonight. So I will waste no more time introducing the man himself. Here is my guest. Throw up all the hearts in the world for this guy, Ryan Hampton. How you doing, brother?
Hey, man, I'm good. How are you? Good to be here.
Yeah. Thank you for coming. Thank you for making time for us.
Yeah, I've got a lot of time these days. So it is
Yeah, how's the quarantine treating you? How is it down? You're in Vegas,
it's
right?
It's getting a little old, quite frankly.
I can imagine. So what was it?
I get it.
You're living in Las Vegas, right?
Yep.
What's it like being in quarantine down there? How is it like with Las Vegas shut down? How is that?
I mean, for the first couple of weeks, it was okay. I mean, I think that, particularly for folks like you and I, recovery people, I mean, it's hard, right? Because we thrive off of the connection with people and, a sense of community and whatnot. I've been doing a lot of Zoom meetings and all of my, all of our work is essentially moved online, but, it would be nice to get back in person. But Definitely. We want to be safe, right? We want to be mindful of what's going on. So, I think that the time is coming and the data is gonna help guide that, but it's been a challenge. Look, even for me, 5 years in recovery now. I mean, I've kind of had peaks and valleys with this whole, COVID, stay at home stuff. And, we'll have to see. I mean, I think the recovery community's given, people out there kind of a really good guidebook, because I don't think any of us are new to social isolation. I think a lot of us have been well prepped for this.
Definitely.
But I oftentimes think about, I always revert back to is this a good thing or bad thing? Being all full digital and whatnot. And I always revert back to those last couple of days before I got into treatment. It would not have been a good scenario for me had I have been looking for help in the midst of something like a COVID. It would have been very hard for me to maintain or even enter some form of recovery.
Oh, definitely. I'm seeing definitely a hardship in people trying to seek recovery right now. That's just across the board.
Yep.
So where did it all start for you, Ryan? What was your drug of choice and when did it start?
So my story isn't your banner fell. You got to get that up.
Yeah, I'll fix that quick.
Your branding, that's super important. I'll cover for you while you do that. My story is not really unique. I mean, it's unique because of me and who I am, and it's my story, but I think it's something that a lot of people share. I had this, I certainly wasn't supposed to become like a heroin addict, right? When I was growing up and when I was a kid, things were quite normal in my household. Did I have adverse trauma as a child growing up? Yeah, absolutely. Did I experiment with drugs in high school? Yes. Did I party in college? Yes. But the thing about college was it wasn't just me partying, it was like everybody else, right? But I was the one who ended up homeless and broke and, you know, without a place to live and looking for help on Thanksgiving Eve 2014 with like nothing to my name, you know, after kind of losing everything, whether it be a job, housing, relationships, job, you know, employment opportunities, health insurance, all of that. You know, for anybody who knows me, or has read my book, American Fix, I mean, I had at one point had kind of this up and coming political career. I was in Washington, D.C. in 2000, right after the presidential election, was working for a political party, 2001 to 2002. I went hiking in 2003 with my roommate, and I had fallen, injured my knee, injured my ankle, ended up in the care of an urgent care physician. You know, they said, this is really bad. You're going to need to get this checked out. You're going to need to get an MRI. And in the meantime, like, here's a script, you know, with what I, at the time, you know, I wish I feel, you know, it sounds crazy when I say this, like, I did not really know what it was I was getting. I got, Dilaudid, which is like, you know, morphine on steroids, and it was take home, and, you know, shocker, big shocker, right? I never went and got the knee taken care of or the MRI, but I did keep going back and getting like more prescriptions and more prescriptions and more prescriptions. And we were kind of chopping it up before, and you had asked me about, you know, being from Florida and LA and you know, Vegas. I had grown up in Florida, and shortly after this injury, South Florida particularly, my dad had passed away while I was living in DC. And so I had come home to be closer to home and took a job back in Florida. But what, you know, I didn't know, right, was, and I don't think any of us knew, was at that time was kind of when this whole pill mill crisis, right? Before there was this like massive opioid crisis around the country, there was this pill mill crisis that was popping up in different regions of the country. And where I lived and where I moved back to was like right in the heart of it, right? Broward County, Florida, which was like just infamous for what was going on there, you know, now with what we know. I was on these medications and had gone to my primary care physician, and he said, look, I'm not that kind of doctor. You're going to need to see a pain care physician. And I got referred to one of these seedy clinics. And that's where it kind of like really blew out of control for me, right? You know, progressively things got worse. You know, I was missing work. I was losing jobs. I was, you know, starting to not make my rent payments. I was, you know, losing my health care and my health insurance, and, you know, ruining relationships with friends and families and family members and coworkers. And it progressively got worse, as we know, to a point that in 2008, when the state of Florida had figured out there was this huge pill problem, right? That they had essentially become this pill pipeline for other states around the country. They actually called the highway right near where I lived, I-95 in Broward, they called it Oxycontin Express, because people would come down from West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, down into South Florida to see these doctors, and then bring the pills back up to North and Midwest. Right, probably in Wisconsin too, the state figured out this was a problem, and so their solution to it was they were just going to shut down all these pill clinics, and they were also going to create this database of anybody who was seeing the doctors there and how much they were getting, and if they were seeing multiple doctors, and, you know, all the data behind that. And I had showed up to one of my appointments one day, and the doctor was like, you know, you're getting too much. You've seen too many doctors. You're doctor shopping. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I need my medication. Like, I need more medication. Like, we know, you know, the progression of addiction. And she's like, I don't care about all that. You're a drug seeking junkie. Like, get out of my office. You're, you know, if you show up here, I'm going to have you arrested. And I was like, what are you talking? Like, what am I going to do? Like, I was ill at that point, like physically sick, right? And withdrawal, and the whole power of choice was way gone at that point, right? Like, I needed my medication. I needed my medicine to survive. It was a life or death scenario. That's how I felt. And I was denied the meds, right? And it was that day that I, you know, started on black market. And the black market led me to heroin, which was cheaper. And then the heroin led to intravenous heroin, which led to multiple overdoses and hospital visits and total and complete homelessness. And not a unique story, right? Like many of us have experienced some version
Yeah,
of
I
that
think we've
story.
all been down that road before. So
And
where was this where were we at this point when you were?
So this was in Florida. This was in South Florida.
Still in Florida. Okay.
I had gotten a small bit of recovery in 2012 in Florida. I had about a year and was living in a recovery house down there, and then took a job in Los Angeles. And as soon as I got to LA, I thought that was like the fix, right? Just get out of Florida, get to the other side of the country, everything's going to be fine. And I was, you know, totally wrong about that. And ended up using it again, right? Which led me to Skid Row, basically in Los Angeles, where I was homeless again and worse off than I was when I was in Florida. And it was the you know, Thanksgiving Eve 2014, after several weeks of literally walking to a payphone on Hollywood and Highland, which is like smack dab in the middle of Hollywood, California, right there on Hollywood Boulevard, and making a phone call every morning to a public treatment center, just seeing if there was a bed. And finally, there was a bed available for me. And it came available that night before Thanksgiving in November of 2014. And I jumped a cab to get there. I had no money for the bus, so I just jumped a cab, got there, and I knew that like as soon as I was in the treatment center, even like if the cab called the police, they couldn't arrest me because I was technically in rehab in a medical facility. I have paid that cab driver back, by the way. But that was the beginning for me, right? Like that was the beginning of my journey.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Someone once told me if you don't have a big book, go steal one, and then you can make amends for it when you get there. So I mean, the ends justify the means sometimes in recovery, you know?
Yeah, same concept.
So what was your recovery date then?
February 2nd, 2015. And I actually claim that date, not the date I entered treatment. I decided to just claim the I needed to hold on to a date. So I'm holding on to the date that I actually left treatment, because I feel that like my recovery actually started that day. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. It's whatever day you identify with. That's awesome either way though, because mine's February 3rd. So.
Right. So we're right on top of each other. That's great.
Hell yeah. That's great. That is great. So what type of recovery did you get into going into the sober living? Was this a 12-step or?
It was 12-step. I, quite frankly, though, everybody in my treatment facility, I was like that, you know, most likely to fail category, right? Like nobody thought, and I didn't think I was going to make it. I thought I was like, my plan was to just like get out of treatment, you know, find a job, you know, hustle up whatever I could, get back to using at some point. And luckily, one of the counselors had found me because I had nothing when I left treatment, right? I had 2 trash bags full of everything I owned. And one of my counselors at the facility had made a call to a recovery house locally and was like, look, we got a great guy here, and, you know, he's having a hard time and he has no money, no place to live. Like, can you take him in for a month until he gets a job? And they did. And I was like, great, I have a place to lay down my head. And I was literally taking it day by day, hour by hour at that point. Mm-hmm. And it ended up being a 12-step recovery house. I ended up bouncing around to a few houses until I found one that I really identified with and could plug in with. But yeah, it was ultimately 12-step recovery that, you know.
Awesome. Awesome. So what do you have I don't like to exploit people's higher power, but what is your higher power in your recovery? Have you?
A lot. I have a lot of different higher power. I mean, it's a spiritual thing for me. I don't necessarily identify with like one specific definition of a higher power, but it's a very spiritual, a very, you know, spiritual being.
Yeah. Spirituality, religion, you know, some people say they're the same thing. They're actually different, but it's, you know, that's all such a beautiful part of recovery, is not only the outer, you know, getting better on the outside, getting better on the inside, just bettering everything. Totally. So after you come into recovery, what would be the point when you decided to start helping others? What started your advocacy?
So I the helping others started just as a result of the 12-step work, and that was different from the advocacy, right? Like, so the helping others was something that was very kind of very community based, like even within like my own sober living. Like that experience started with like helping other guys that I was in the house with. The advocacy was like a completely different, story. That happened about a year in. I had gotten this, one of my first jobs, I guess. I mean, you guess you call it a job, but it was a job to me, right? It was to be kind of like a peer mentor, volunteer house manager at the sober living I was living at. And it was about a year in, and there was the job, descriptions of that was like, hey, work with the guys, help them get to meetings, tell them, give them kind of the orientation when they come in, and just kind of like be there for them, when the owner's not there. And we had a resident whose name was Nick, and Nick was 20, I don't know, he was like 24 years old, young guy, was totally into music. He had been struggling with heroin for a while, but when he came into the house, he stayed for about 3 or 4 months, and he was clean. And one night he came home from work, probably around 7:30 at night, and he was like, "Look, I got to tell you, I've been, I'm using again. It's been going on for a minute now. I don't know what to do. I want to get some help, but I have no money. I can't tell my job because they're gonna, fire me. I can't tell my parents because they're not gonna, they're not answering the phone anyway at this point.
Yeah.
I have no insurance. I don't know what to do. Help me." Right. And that, that's a heavy lift, right? That's like a heavy lift, especially for like somebody a year in. And the way I worked with him that night, the way that our house had worked with him, was just to offer our own experience and kind of get into the book and things like that. The problem though was like come 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, it was clear that like the owner of the house he couldn't stay at the house that night. So Nick had to like physically leave the house, go find somewhere to, quote unquote, dry out or whatever. And then he could come back, but there was nowhere to send it. And, we kept talking to him. The clock kept running. It came about 11 o'clock at night. It was just absolutely clear the owner wanted him off the property. So we had to figure out options. And the last 12-step meeting in our community had ended sometime around 8:30 that night. So the best idea we had was there's a hospital, which was just about, maybe a mile away from where we were at. He could go to the hospital, check into this, ER room, tell him he needs detox, tell him what he was telling us, tell us, tell the doctor that he's afraid he's going to die of an overdose, whatever, just whatever he had to say, just to get into that ER room, get overnight, call us the next day, get a discharge. We'll come get him. He can come back to the house according to the rules. So that's what he did. Nick went to the ER room that night. He was, shuffled in and out of the ER within 3 hours. He was given no services, no bed. This isn't just any hospital though. This was like one of the best hospitals in Southern California, like $1 billion endowment that they have every year for different types of services like cancer and diabetes and things like that. And he was treated like a second-class citizen. He was discharged with nothing except a white piece of paper with a bunch of 800 numbers on it and crisis helplines that he could call if he was quote unquote willing. And Nick, on his way home that night, used one more time, and that we never saw him again. He died, and his body was found the next morning about 3 blocks from our house, slumped over on the sidewalk. And they came in to tell us, that morning, and woke us all up, and we had this, kind of deck area where we would, smoke and just, congregate in the mornings and the evenings, and they circle us all up and tell us what happened, and said this is what happens. That's how it was put to me. Like, this is going to continue to happen. This is what happens when you use again, and all the cliches, right? And nothing about that was okay with me. Like it was expected that we were just supposed to be like, okay, let's just like go on, another friend dead. And that's not how I felt. That's not how the other members of our house felt. We were mad because did he use again? Yeah. Was there some accountability there on his part? Absolutely. Was he seeking help? Yes. Did he go to a, modern day medical facility, a place that we're all, taught to trust from a very young age when we have some sort of problem with, a healthcare problem? Yes. Was he turned away? Was he denied care? Was he stigmatized? Would he have been treated like that had he been coming in with a heart attack or a diabetic, had a diabetic coma or anything like that? No, absolutely not. But he was an addict, so they didn't really care. And that was the day that that whole situation just shook me to my core, and it felt wrong. And those cliches of like, others have to die so you can recover, and that's just BS. Okay, like nobody needs to die so that I can keep my seat. Like nobody needs to die so that I can stay in recovery. Like that's just crazy, right? And like little sayings like that really got to me, because it almost felt like, well, that's just a nice way of saying we're just not going to deal with this and it's your fault. You know what I mean? And that's when I got involved, right? That's when it was that week when I started searching out, like, what is it that I could be doing? What were other people doing? It happened to be the summer of the presidential election of 2016, and I had decided to travel the country, and visit communities hit hardest by the drug crisis, and talk to other people, and find recovery community organizations and people who were still struggling with substance use, and peer recovery coaches and family members and policymakers, and went inside of jails and prisons. And my best friend and I traveled 8,000 miles over 30 days and crossed 22 states, and just stopped in every single city, town, big, small, rural, whatever, to talk to people. And got back from that trip, and that's when the Voices Project was born, because we had realized that we weren't the only ones who were frustrated by this kind of attitude, right? And this kind of thought process that kind of left us out there on our own to try and figure this out. That we needed more of a community-based approach. We needed more communities to be loud about it. We needed people with lived experience to start demanding from their policymakers some real changes and real funding and real, infrastructure when it comes to people maintaining their recovery. And I started writing, right? I started getting louder. I started, going, kind of sharpening those community organizing and political skills that I had gotten at a young age, and said, well, maybe I wasn't supposed to be like advocating and raising money for some political party. Maybe it's always been, in front of me this whole time. Like maybe it's my own peeps, right? My own people, like people who are in recovery and seeking recovery and everything in between. Like maybe that's where my purpose lies. And it is like, I truly believe that every part of my journey in using and in recovery has been for a reason, right? And
Right.
and it's led me to where I'm at today. And I believe in all my heart that like every movement, right? We are a movement. People in recovery are a movement. We have to be organized. We have to get involved. We've got to not just tell our stories, but figure out a way to turn that public narrative into a story of now, right? That moves people's feet and creates change and creates more space for others to do the same thing. And in a nutshell, I mean, that's kind of, how it started and where it got us to where we're at today. And a lot of people, have come before me, right? So, I mean, like all the work I do is on the shoulders of like some very big giants, and advocacy, right? Organizing around recovery. This isn't something that's new, that started in the last couple of years. I mean, this, Bill Wilson, founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, his sponsee, Marty Mann, who was a woman, started the first national advocacy organization for people struggling with alcohol and drug addiction. It was called the NCAD, National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. Bill Wilson spoke before Congress. Marty Mann was a fierce advocate that traveled the country and helped organize different local chapters. So this is something that's been going on for decades. We're just carrying on that torch, right? But we have different tools at our disposal these days. We've got, the internet, and we've got, social, tools, social media, action tools that are available to other social justice movements and healthcare movements. We need to employ those same tactics for our movement.
Definitely. Amen to all that, man. That's awesome. And I mean, first off, condolences on your friend, man, that Nick that passed away. I mean, but what it started with you, and that lit a fire inside of you, and that pushed forward for the work that you've done. So that's awesome that you're carrying his message, and that you're carrying the message for all recovering addicts, really, and everything that you're doing. And I just thank you for everything you're doing for us too, man.
Thank you for what you're doing, because like you've been doing this show and getting others involved. Listen, you're in Wisconsin. I love Wisconsin. I got to tell you, anybody from Wisconsin who's listening, Wisconsin is kind of leading the way on recovery advocacy. I'm fortunate enough to be able to kind of travel around and see what's happening in other states and communities when it comes to the recovery movement. And I've done a lot of Recovery Month events, and I was able to be in. That's where we met, right? I was able to be in Wisconsin last Recovery Month in 2019, and I mean, that is, it is rare when you see, an event that large, very hyper focused on recovery. I mean, there must have been 1,000 people there. I mean, it was phenomenal.
I believe there was over 2,000 this year, and next year is predicted to be bigger. So
yeah, and that is like a testament to like the power of your recovery organizing in Wisconsin. Wisconsin has Wisconsin Voices for Recovery. I mean, not every state is lucky enough to have that. So I mean, there's a lot of great work going on in your state, and anybody who's listening and wants to get involved should go check out those organizations, right? And they should get involved, and they should figure out how they want to turn their story into their purpose, and not just for the purpose. Like it's one thing to share your story within our own community, right? We've been doing that for a long time, and that is a huge part of like how we stay clean, how we stay sober, how we stay in recovery. Is like we find that connection through our own stories. But telling our public narrative to an outside audience that may not be impacted by the issue, or think that they're not impacted by the issue, and finding kind of like how we tell a story of us, right? Like, how is it that we're relatable in our own story, but with other people who may never have met us, and then asking them to join our movement, to get involved, right? Mm-hmm. That's a whole different ball game in terms of recovery stories. And it's my hope and my purpose and my passion. And we do this through Mobilize Recovery, and we do this through the Voices Project, and we do this at the Recovery Advocacy Project, mostly on like the local, state level. And we've got partners that do it on the federal level. It's my hope that we mobilize everyone who is able to tell their story in a way that moves people's feet into action, right? To get them involved. There's a lot of people in recovery in this country, right? I mean, we've got 23 million people, according to the federal government, that live in long-term recovery in this country. We've got probably another 22 million or so who need help right now. That's add that to the other number, it's 45 million. Add their family members, you're looking at like 1 in 3 households in the United States directly impacted. The math is on our side, right? If we were organized and united and being more open about not just our experience, but how we can work together with our communities, we could get a lot more done. Definitely.
And it's open-mindedness on everybody's part. On our part as recovering addicts, we need to have an open mind. And if communities can come together and open their minds as well, because I have heard complaints of people saying that, it's really hard to open a rehab in some neighborhoods and in some areas, but at the same time, a crack dealer can set up shop down the corner, so we really need to start changing the way we look at addiction, changing the way we look at addicts, and changing the way we look at everything that goes on out there.
Totally.
Definitely. Well, Ryan, I want to thank you for coming and hanging out with me and sharing your story with us, man. This was awesome. And it's, crazy. Still think it's just crazy that me and you happened to meet on the state capitol steps last year, and that this is happening now. This is the beauty of recovery right here, man.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Let's do it again, and we'll link up when I'm in Wisconsin.
For sure, brother. That'd be great, man.
Awesome. Right. Thanks, Patty. It was great to be on.
Yeah, thanks for coming here, man. Have a good night.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The point of meets. The point of change meets Ryan Hampton. The point of meets. I'm done with that. Done with that. What's up, you guys? Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Thank you guys for coming and meeting Ryan Hampton. I hope this story really hits you in the heart. That the whole thing with his friend Nick there, really, I mean, just wow, that floored me. I was not expecting the end of that story to go that way. I was really thinking that was going the other way when he started talking about how the guy was trying so hard, you know. But unfortunately, that's so many of our stories out there. So we got to keep speaking, guys. We got to keep spreading the message. We got to keep letting people know that they can do this, that they can pull it off. Because so many people out there can recover, and all they're waiting for is someone to tell them that they can, and to see somebody else do it. Because when you're surrounded by failure, it feels like that's all there is. So if we can keep showing our success, we can keep raising up recovery and keep pushing this message as far as we can, maybe enough people will hear that it's possible, and maybe more people will try. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. I love you all so much. If this video hits you in the heart, please hit that share button. Tag somebody. I love you all. Have a great night, and I will see you all tomorrow morning right here on The Point of Change. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay clean.